Oh, good. You made it. We don't have long agents, so I'm going to be brief. I need to talk to you about Nerd Bourbon Book Club. It's a book discussion show that happens at least once a month on the Nerd Bourbon network of podcasts. Your mission is to find out what book they're reading and listen in on their discussion about it. And your mission begins immediately. Before we get into this episode of Book Club proper, we do have an announcement to make, just really quickly. We'll also announce this on the next episode of the main show, but Book Club is dead! I'm just kidding. It's not dead, but it is changing. We are changing the structure. Todd and I had a discussion, and we have decided to move Book Club to a more sporadically updated show. Because the rigid sort of monthly deadline structure that we've had has kind of been like really hard for us to meet. Because we both lead busy lives, especially me. Like I'm gearing up to a wedding later this year, and kind of making time to read a book every month has been more and more strenuous, and to the point where literally like I just got done reading this month's book like 30 minutes ago.
It's like half the time, like the past couple weeks, like I mean the past couple months we've done book club, we've both like read it like probably like a week before the month ends.
Yeah, so and I mean like it's rare that we actually have the time to just read it at our leisure, and so in other words, it starts to become like work. Like it starts to feel kind of like, fuck, I guess I'm gonna read this book, and we don't want that for book club. We want to like enjoy what we're doing, and I think that the quality of the show is going to be better when we're actually reading books at our leisure. Kind of like Shots. Like basically expect book club to move to the same structure that Shots is, where it's going to like kind of pop up when it pops up. Now, I am going to say, like, on our end, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bank episodes early, and then announce on the show and post them a week, 2 weeks after the announcement is made. So that way we have no chance of disappointing you guys, because we'll already have the episodes done before we even announce it. And then if you are a listener that likes to actually read along, you'll still have a couple of weeks to do that before the episode is posted. And for the record, there may be months where we don't have an episode of Book Club. There may be months where we have 1 or 2 or 3, episodes of Book Club. Like, we're just not going to have such a rigid structure anymore, because, there are months where I'm not able to read a book, very easily. There are months where I'm able to read several books. Like, after The Last Jedi came out, like, we didn't have an episode of Book Club in December, but I read like 4 books in December, and I could have done an episode of Book Club on either one of them. And, we have ideas for future Book Club episodes. Book Club is not dying, but it is changing. And I just wanted to sort of formally announce that we are not going to stick to the rigid like monthly structure. It's going to be a little more sporadic. You will still get notice. You will still be able to read along. But it's not going to continue forward just at the end of every month as it has been since we launched it back in August or something like that. So yeah, that's it. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, you covered it.
All right, cool. So let's get into to this month's episode of Book Club. This month's episode is about Significant Zero by Walt Williams. So, what did you know about this going in, if anything?
I knew it was another book about game design and game development.
So, yeah, like, I feel a little bit bad because, like, we've read, let's see, we've done 3 game design books so far. We've done Harry Potter, fiction book, and we've done the first volume of the Berserk manga.
Yeah,
I think that moving forward, we're gonna steer clear of video game design books unless something really kind of jumps out at us, because we're a little burnt out by it.
I think I joked with you like earlier, like probably earlier in the week, and I was like, I swear to God, if I read about Crunch one more goddamn time.
But they have been really interesting, and I want to kind of compare and contrast Significant Zero with the other books about video game design that we have read.
Okay.
Because it's interesting, right? Like they handle like a similar topic in different ways. So like Significant Zero, it's written by a guy named Walt Williams. It sort of follows. It's not like, like we did Blood, Sweat, and Pixels a few months ago, which is sort of a rigid, like, here are 12 stories about 12 different video games. Significant Zero really follows like this dude's career.
Yeah.
And sort of tells his whole story really from beginning to end. And yeah, like it's kind of interesting to follow that sort of structure. Masters of Doom is similar to that, except that Masters of Doom, which was one of the first ones we did, I think it was like episode 2 or something.
That sounds about right.
Masters of Doom was like this same sort of structure of following careers, but told from the third person.
Mm-hmm.
So like this one is told from the first person, and you almost feel like Significant Zero has a vibe of like you're sort of like hanging out with him. You're kind of hanging out with Walt, and he's kind of telling his story. And I think I prefer that to both of the other examples. I prefer the first person kind of chill vibe of Significant Zero a lot more, I think, than the rigidity of Blood, Sweat, and Pixels and the third person sort of documentarian style of Masters of Doom.
I can agree. I can definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, like I said, I definitely agree with that. I will say this though, dude's kind of a dick.
How so?
Oh man, some of the shit like later on in the book, like he's just kind of like, he's blunt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's very blunt. I mean, he kind of picked that up from the Fox, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he sort of learned a lot of that. It's kind of interesting to see his character arc a little bit, just as a human being. The ways that he grows up, and yeah, he becomes blunt, I guess. But there's something that like it's weird. I guess I don't view him as a dick because like that's kind of something that I have in my life is I'm very blunt and I'm very honest, and I'm often perceived by some people as being an asshole or a dick or something like that. I know when to bite my tongue, but like when somebody needs to hear the God's honest truth, and when somebody doesn't need to be babied and spoon fed, which is the case with Walt. Like he's not gonna bullshit you, Like I don't think that makes you a dick. I'll say this: I prefer the first half of the book to the second half of the book.
Yeah, same.
Because once you hit that tipping point, and it does become more about like, and you actually even said this after you initially read the book. You read this book a few days before I did, and the second half of the book kind of takes that turn where he starts to like talk about crunch, and almost like takes he almost fetishizes crunch a little bit.
I swear, it's like a full
because
2 or 3 pages just about crunch.
Well, you were talking about this, like it sort of speaks to you a little bit because there's a part of you that's like you love it.
Yeah, no, like I straight up told you, I'm like, I found that those couple pages are very relatable, just because like me coming out of like a job that I was working myself to death, I miss it.
There's a part of you that feels like it's that thing where like in Lost, right? Spoilers for a super old show, I guess. When they finally get off the island, they just want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you go through like hell, when you go through war, like crunch is hell, right? And that's a unilateral thing that anybody will tell you about video game design, is that crunch time is always going to happen and it's always going to suck, and everybody hates it. But there is that part of you that morbidly loves getting your ass beat,
Mm-hmm.
And like will even miss it when it isn't happening. And this book touches on that, which is interesting because when you read something like Blood, Sweat, and Pixels really downplays that.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of downplays like it just kind of says crunch sucks, and it doesn't really like dive into how developers actually might feel about it. And I think that's because Significant Zero is written from the first person. Yeah. It's written from somebody who actually goes through it, I really liked the structure of the first half of the book a lot more, though, because I liked the sort of like window into his life, I guess, and the steps that he took to getting where he is. Because, like, you know, like that's my ultimate goal, is I would love to be a video game writer in some capacity, or just really a professional writer in any capacity. But video games and video game design is a passion of mine, and I would love to meld those two. So it was nice to see this dude, Walt Williams, who comes from he comes from Bossier City, Louisiana, which is not even an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where I currently live. And in a lot of weird ways, like, reading about his upbringing, like, really hit home for me.
Mm.
I mean, like, really hit home. Like, even talking about, like, some of the shit, like, with his, you know, going to church and stuff, just being, like, a Louisiana boy, basically. And I was like, man, like, I relate to this on, like, a hardcore level. And, I don't know, it was just kind of cool, like, following his journey, I guess. What was your favorite, I guess, part or parts, like, chapters or kind of moments?
Well, one of my favorite moments is when he met, what's his name? Dude that made BioShock.
Ken Levine.
Oh, Ken Levine. The part with Ken Levine was hilarious.
Where, when he was talking about, like, his screenshots or whatever?
Yeah, he just basically walks past. He's like, "You the screenshot guy? They're not good. They suck."
he's like they suck. They're not good. Sorry. To do whatever. And, you know, I liked that, though, because he was talking about how Ken Levine was like, whatever you're doing, just don't do it. Just do it again, do it different, you know? And he went back and he did it different, and Ken came back later on, and he's like, wow, like, these are great, like, these are beautiful. And he was saying,
this is doing, basically.
Right. He's like, keep doing what you're doing. These are great. These are beautiful. This is exactly what I wanted. And, like, he talked about how, like, that was so much nicer than, like, his regular boss. Just have a little positive reinforcement, you know? The BioShock section in general is my favorite section in the book.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. No, it was a really good section.
I loved that. And it's not, I'm a little bit biased, I guess, because I love Ken Levine is my fucking god. Are you kidding me? Like, I worship at the altar of Ken Levine, and, like, I love BioShock. It's, like, one of my favorite games of all time. And I knew a lot about its development already. I knew the story that is relayed about how the Little Sisters design changed, the way that you deal with the Little Sisters in the game.
Yeah.
I knew about that, but it was really interesting getting that story told to me from the perspective of somebody that was actually there and was, like, running the demos that were being shown to the focus groups that ultimately ended up changing the design of the game. My favorite bit from the entire book, and it's also in the BioShock section, it's the design philosophy that was brought in when they were going over, like, the plasmids that need to be cut and all this different design stuff. The question of, what can you do with a dead cat? I love that so much. That's such a good design philosophy with BioShock, because it's like you can burn the cat and throw it into use telekinesis to pick it up and throw it into a bunch of oil. You can pick up the cat and just throw it at an enemy and kill them with the cat, and like all these different applications for dead cats. They pushed for having the cat to be frozen and shattered into catsicles and stuff like that. And there were all these complications to making that work. But that is BioShock at its core. Like, distilled that is BioShock in its core, is the amount of stuff that you can do with a dead cat. And I loved that.
Yeah, there's a lot of good moments in the BioShock part, even with just the plasmids. Just like when they're talking about which plasmids they should cut, and everybody's like, well, no, I like that one, basically.
Yeah, it's like, oh, Cyclone Trap kind of sucks. Let's get rid of Cyclone Trap. I'm like, are you kidding me? I use Cyclone Trap, like, all the time. Like, that's kind of the best thing about BioShock, is the amount of options those are the options presented to the player. Yeah. Yeah, I loved that section of the book so much, but I also loved, like, just, I guess, his path getting to where he is as a video games writer, and also, like, he he doesn't shy away from showing how like nasty it can be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment in the book where he's working on Mafia 2, and he's talking about this guy, I think his name was Carlito or something like that, who worked on, writing in Mafia 2, and he was just like this kind of eponymous sort of like figure who's like this, this badass who just locks himself away. And I think he says like he works all day and he does only the basic human needs, like, and if you work with Carlito, you come out like a changed human being and shit like that.
Yeah.
And it's funny, he really like gives these characters a lot of like personality, these people that like he works with, like they all have kind of like a larger than life, like you could almost imagine like a movie, these being like movie characters. There's the fox, his boss or whatever, this sort of like French speaking sort of brass balls executive type, I don't know, he does a really good job of that. But anyway, he's working on Mafia 2, and this dude Carlito or whatever texts him, and he's like, you got any plans this weekend? And Walt's like, no. And he's like, well, good, we have work to do. They had to write 2,000 lines of dialogue for these like fucking like store clerks.
Mm-hmm.
Like just basically random ass dialogue that NPCs were gonna say.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just sitting there over the weekend writing all this dialogue. And like oh my god, like just the amount of variation that is required. Just, one gun store clerk, he has to have like 5 to 10 different ways to say hello.
Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, I would want to shoot myself.
And that's just one of like many people that he had to write for. And what's funny is he talked about the way that the writing process evolved. Like after a while, he started just saying like he had to write lines about like the gun store clerk trying to sell you a Tommy gun. And eventually the guy's just like, it shoots bullets really fucking fast. What else do you need to know? There's actually a story. This actually made me laugh out loud. A story that he tells after he wrote the dialogue for Mafia 2 and stuff like that. He gets into the recording booth and he has these 4 actors who are very like Italian American, kind of like, oh, hey, kind of like machismo, kind of dudes. And they're all talking, they're flipping through a menu and they're looking at what to eat for lunch. They're going to order pizza. And one of them's like, hey, like, am I a pussy if I order a vegetarian pizza or whatever? Or, or no, he's like, I'm thinking about ordering a vegetarian pizza. I want to lose some weight. Does that make me gay? And the guy's like, no, you're only gay if you order the side of cock. and the guy goes, oh, well, shit, the cock's the best part. That actually made me like laugh out loud.
That's yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I just like the way that the book like kind of makes characters out of these people. There's the character of DT, who is kind of like Walt is kind of like the publisher, or started as like kind of the publisher kind of guy, and DT's like the marketing kind of guy, and they're kind of going on the same path at different times. Mm-hmm. Just going in different ways on the same path, I guess. Except it's like fucking like crushing this dude. And he talks about how like demanding, the job and the work style is and stuff like that. And the guy just kept saying like a man chooses, a slave obeys, and shit like that. I was like, damn, like that. It's just really like, I don't know. It's that really kind of spoke to me. And it's almost like, it's nice for me to be reading these books that do not glamorize the life of working in video games, because like it really fucking sucks, but it's also extremely rewarding. There's that story he tells about how he had to demo at like a Comic-Con. He had to demo this game. He didn't say which game, but he demoed this game like all day long. Just, he ran through the same demo like 4 times in an hour, and I think he demoed for like 10 hours. Mm-hmm. And there was this little kid that like kept sneaking into the demo. You remember this?
Yeah.
And this kid sneaks into the demo, and he just keeps watching it, and eventually the kid's like, oh, like is it okay that I keep watching this? Or he's like, yeah. And he ended up giving the kid like a bunch of like free swag and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And hours later the kid brings him back a signed like Darkness comic or something like that. And he talked about how moments like that are kind of what like make it worth it when you like actually improve somebody's life with your writing. And I really like too. I never played Spec Ops: The Line, but that's sort of his big claim to fame, is he was like head writer of Spec Ops: The Line or whatever.
I never played the game, but I do know like the story is like supposed to be like interesting.
Yeah.
If anything.
And that's what I've heard too. I always meant to play because I've heard it's great, but I just never got around to it. And it was interesting hearing his experience on Spec Ops: The Line as well. Especially with
that
like
shit almost broke him. What you mean?
Yeah, like that shit was his like death knell, basically. But it was interesting hearing the ways that the game like fundamentally changed, like on the fly, Like the shit with the helicopter was just like, yeah, they're doing the helicopter shit at the beginning now. He's like, okay, well the story's going this way now. Just like the adaptation that you have to have as a video game writer, the on the fly, like you have to solve these problems instantly, Do we want to talk about there's a chapter that grabbed you even before you started reading the book?
Yes, the cruel tutelage of Peter Griffin. Now, it's funny as I've been wanting to jump in and talk about that. Now, I enjoyed that little chapter for what it was.
I did too.
And it's just as a for a writer that's just starting out, just to get that one joke in there, that's a big win, Like
right.
That was a cool little moment, Like he thought he was doing some good shit.
Yeah, essentially what it was, because this dude worked at like Take Two or 2K throughout.
I think it's Take Two.
Well, they're the same thing. They started off and they became sort of the same thing. But yeah, so like basically his career was like throughout that, and they were doing a lot of like licensed games in the early days. One of them being a Family Guy game, and essentially it was being made by this studio who had no writer, so like their script was just like terrible, and Walt sat there and like basically rewrote the entire script and sent it into the Family Guy staff. They were all happy with it. Walt and the Fox were both like totally happy with the script, and they thought they did something good, and they sent it into the Family Guy studio and they're like, this is shit. We're getting rid of all of this except for like one bit. That was a good joke. Other than that. So, but what a great chapter name, The Cruel Tutelage of Peter Griffin.
I was sitting there like before I even started reading, and I was like looking through the chapters. I'm like, ooh, what is this?
I really like I read this on my Kindle, and I've just really enjoyed reading books on my Kindle, man. Like reading books on my Kindle is just so easy and nice.
I don't know, like I have one, but I just prefer the having a book in my hand.
I used to be like that. I was like that for a long time, and I'm still sort of like that with comics. I don't think that digital comics are quite there yet. Like for digital comics, like they're kind of a pain in the ass for me to read, especially the ones that go like panel by panel. Like I hate that. I don't know. For me, comic books, I need to have them, but for actually like reading a book, I find it quite nice to just sit there with my Kindle in like one hand and just casually read. Anyway, I feel like my thoughts are kind of scattered, but overall, I just, I would say that I enjoyed the book. Stacking it against the other game design books that we've read, I do think that I prefer the style, as I said earlier. So if I were to read another video game design book, I think it would have to be in this style, this first person sort of style. It felt more, it felt more like hangouty, I guess, and I really liked that about it. And overall, it's a good book. I recommend it. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, it was a fun read. I'd recommend it to anybody that wants to read about game design.
Yeah, I would too. Do you have any other thoughts? Anything else you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I think we are good.
All right, man. So yeah, Significant Zero, good book. If you're into game design, read it. Bye.
See ya.